Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
For the Booze.
For the Booze.
What's up, everybody?
Hello, hello. Hope all you listeners are doing good.
Having a great... Oh, geez, when does this come out? Having a great week, whatever.
Having
Monday.
a grand old time.
Having a great Monday.
Yes.
Okay, it would be a Monday, and it's July. July is upon us. The heat stroke is here.
Oh, God, yes. Already.
The heat stroke is here. So what's new with you?
A lot.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Been a busy bee.
A busy bee.
A busy bee.
I wish I could say the same.
Getting used to it, you know?
So what is it? What do you got going on? Manager Meg.
Going into a new line of work at my same work.
Yeah. You love it, right?
So far, it's good.
I won't drill you on it just in case people from your work listen.
I don't know. I haven't really gotten into a whole bunch of the nitty gritty of it. Yeah. I'm just kind of learning everywhere right now.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So we actually had a suggestion from like one of the very first Paranormal Oddity Space we did. And it was before we really started doing that. Yep. And I don't remember who sent it in, but it's our first time we're leaving the country.
Going overseas.
Going to Ireland. I'm going to just do the most obnoxious Irish accent.
You do it so
good. Top of the
to
morning to you.
You're doing so good, though.
We lost it. But yeah, we are going to instead of just a location, because the location that was given to us was a place called the Commodore Hotel.
Yes.
Which there is accounts of paranormal activity. But upon looking at it, there was also another very paranormal spot. There's actually a bunch of them, but
where the Commodore Hotel is included in. It's basically the vast.
It's an area
surroundings.
It's an area, and it's called Cobh. No, it's called Cobh, but it's spelled Cobh.
It's C-O-B-H.
I don't know how they do stuff over there, but it's pronounced Cobh. Cobh, pretty sure. And the majority of it is going to be based around, from what I wrote, is going to be the majority of the Commodore Hotel and Spike Island. Mm-hmm. These were the two most prominent things that I found in that area. But actually looking earlier today, we might be going back to Cobh at another point because there are a few more places. And I also uncovered a cool little group known as the Cobh Paranormal Investigators.
Ooh.
So that being said, today you can just consider this the Cobh episode.
Yes.
We're going to Cobh.
And all it has to offer.
All it has to offer. Spooky dooky glory. But as normal, we do have a listener story sent in by Northern Nevada PRDS. They are a paranormal research development group.
Amazing.
Started talking to one of these guys in our spaces. Very awesome people, but they do things a little bit differently.
Amazing. I love it. Hit me.
I would never.
With the story.
No, man, I would never.
I know.
Never. And away we go. I've always had experiences. And anecdotally speaking, personal experiences don't count for much when it comes to an investigation of this type. But this isn't about investigating. This is why I began diving down the rabbit hole of these kind of investigations. 1985 in Redondo Beach, California. My grandmother and grandfather's house. I spent a lot of time with them, more than the other cousins did, and grandkids. It was our favorite place to be, bar none, to their dying day. There were specifically 2.5 wrong spots to be in this house. When you entered through the front door, there was a table to the right with grandma's knickknacks and various parcelings. To the left, a drawing room, a den with a television and some gaudy furniture, a leather rocking / lazy boy type armchair, a large television, and ColecoVision. Wow. Predating Nintendo. I know what that is.
Yeah.
God, I'm old. Predating Nintendo, but after Atari. To the right was the hall, and the hall was fine. At the left far end of the hall, just past the restroom, was the bedroom. And the bedroom belonged to my grandparents. To the right was a guest room. The guest room door was always closed. It was seldom, if ever, used. Even when I stayed the night as a child, I either slept on a cot in the den, in the living room, past the drawing room, through the kitchen and dining room, through the second dining room, more an office space now, and into the living room. The living room was half a wrong place. During the daytime, when everyone was awake and it was trafficked, it was seldom wrong. But if you were by yourself, or if it was quiet and there weren't much of anything going on, it was from time to time, quote, wrong. Like the guest room, which always had a heavy, disconcerting, and oppressive weight to it, the living room would sometimes too. I never experienced anything out of the sorts, though my grandfather did on a few occasions, as did my mother and my uncles. See, it wasn't the living room that was so bad, but if from the living room to the right into sort of a parlor, out the back sliding glass doors was the patio to an enormous backyard. If you turned a sharp left, there was a walkway with a lot of broken beaded glass. The walkway extended the entire length of the house from the patio, all along the fence, to the end. There was a gate to the driveway. No one went there. Not my grandparents, not anyone. My cousins and I were little, and the one time we considered dating one another to go back there, daring was supposed to be what was said. I don't think they were dating each other. To go back there, they were stopped. At the time, the reason made sense. Broken glass, of course. Decades later, my mother tells me that the reason was because there was something, quote unquote, wrong with it. Not the glass, not the walkway itself, just the air occupying that space. It wasn't a gas leak or unsafe chemicals. It was just wrong, and no one liked to go there. It was also on the other side of the living room. No one used the walkway behind the house. No one was going to clean it up. No one was going to do anything with it. They would just go along with it. The area, like the guest room and the living room on rare occasion, were cold spots. The guest room and walkway were frequently cold, even when they had no business being cold. As a small child, when left alone in the living room for extended periods in the evening, there were times I became so uncomfortable, scared is what I'd call it as a small child, that I'd go into the kitchen to be near Grandma or find my grandpa just to hang out with him. My mother has a lot of stories about that house, her experiences there, and my grandfather's experiences there, and why me and the other kids weren't supposed to go into the guest room or in the walkway behind the house. Like this, they're anecdotal, but the way the air in those places felt to me, I can understand why. Looking back, there was one time I managed to get into the guest room, 1986 at this point. I remember going into the room and it seemed like I was unwelcome, but I knew my grandma had hidden some of my toys on a shelf in that closet, just to keep the clutter away. I knew within 5 minutes, someone sent my dad to come collect me out of that room, because no one really went in that room. Even family guests who stayed over, who attempted to sleep in that room, would just end up sleeping in the den or the living room. This was a feeling I wouldn't forget. It wasn't just feeling afraid of something I couldn't see. It wasn't just because an adult said not to be in there. Whatever it was, whether some unseen spook or specter, or just the accumulation of some non-sentient or semi-sentient bad energy, I remember the way it felt, and that memory and that feeling never left. In 1985, I lived in Gardena, California. I was maybe 10 minutes from Redondo, 10 minutes from Grandma and Grandpa. My house in Gardena was not haunted. I was never afraid of it. And often, as my parents fought, the house always just felt like a house. The national anthem just finished playing on the black and white television a small, maybe 15-inch black and white television set that my mom kept on so that I had background noise to lull me to sleep. I never slept then, and not much more than I do now, and part of it was ADHD. Lots of energy, nothing to do with it after lights out. Anthem finishes playing, and it's just the steady sound of static, so I put it on UHF channel and turned that plastic knob until something appeared. Old Godzilla movies. So I was going to go back to bed, but I didn't want to get caught up being late. I didn't want to get in trouble. I can still feel the cold radiating off the glass. Nothing spectral or paranormal about it. It was probably around autumn or so in Gardena, a suburb of Los Angeles. So nights were chilly, what I would consider chilly back then. And my window didn't have blinds or drapes or curtains. But I can still feel the cold radiating off of it. I imagine that in part because as I turned to go back to bed, I saw a faint phosphorescent glow outside. It was a little bit down the road. There were railroad tracks, and there was the entirety of the scene in translucent green. That weird color, I know, now looks similar to phosphorus. What appeared to be a man. I couldn't make out any features. It was too far away. But close enough, I could see he looked like he was wearing shabby clothes, albeit semi-translucent, semi-opaque. The thing is, I can't say that it does or doesn't make sense because the memory is 38 years old or so. And because I don't really know how things work with, quote-unquote, the other side, because no one does. He was at first standing next to some crates stacked up, wooden crates. Also semi-translucent. Also, that same green as he was. His clothing was shabby. I couldn't tell, and I remember I was trying hard to see better what level of shabby they were, but to me, he looked homeless. This spectral-looking man in the shabby clothing sat down on one of those crates, and it looked like he was drinking. I was slightly, what's a good word for it? Not afraid. Somehow in 1985, at only 5 years old, I knew this guy wasn't really a person, at least not a person anymore. Instinct or just some weird, quote, kids know the damnedest things, unquote moment. I knew he must have been something else, maybe a ghost, but even that didn't and doesn't seem accurate. See, I could see whatever it was, and I thought I couldn't make out too many details about his face, and I know it had like a little bit of a beard, and I know at one point it actually smiled. All its movements, sitting down, standing, sitting, they were interactive, like it was talking to someone else that wasn't there, or at least that I couldn't see. Knowing now what I didn't know then, I could suggest that this was recurrent, repeating, what is commonly known as a residual haunting. More or less, a spectral 3D event that plays and replays when certain conditions are met. Even the same time each time every night. I checked the next night, and it wasn't there. I stayed up late, as I had, specifically to check, and it wasn't there. Mm. So.
Wow.
Well written, by the way.
I took the words right out of my mouth. That was a fantastic story. Oh my goodness.
This is a very intelligent guy. I got that from the very first time I ever spoke to him. Very well written. I love that. I love that he's not just all in.
Right.
You know,
absolutely.
There's a level of skepticism that's there with the level of belief. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually where me and him started talking, was because I was more like, I could relate to that more. Yeah. You know, where I do believe, I do feel a lot of skepticism at the same time. So I enjoyed that.
And I feel like people who do have that, like you, they're more, when things like that happen, they have a different view on it than a lot of other people do.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, that was just a fantastically written story that was amazing.
It was.
I couldn't even imagine looking out my window and seeing some green, translucent, what?
5 years old, too, and
I
being
get
scared.
I get the whole feelings thing.
Yeah.
Like the feelings, like at his grandparents' house, like there wasn't ever anything there, anything. It was just the feelings. And I've had those many times in my life. And I 100% get that.
It was thank you very much. That was
so very
it was
much.
a great story, and it was very well written, and we both enjoyed that very much. But we do have to move on into our episode full of words that I'm not going to be able to pronounce, but I'm going to try so hard and mess it up so bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Just remember, Irish people, we love you.
We do.
Nothing personal. We're trying our hardest. We'll do our best on this story.
Sorry ahead of time, okay?
Yeah, right? We're not going to know how to say this stuff. Don't worry. We'll get it not even close. But you'll know what we're talking about, maybe. As always, I'd like to give a shout out to a few websites like www.archaeology.org, wikipedia.com.
Wikipedia.
Let me say that sexy name again, wikipedia.com. Spiritisle.ie, CommodoreHotel.ie, and, of course, all the beautiful Irish folks that live there today. Just want to give them a shout out, too.
Hey.
Love them people. According to legend, one of the first colonists of Ireland was Neimhidh, Neimhidh, holler back, who landed in Cork Harbor over 1,000 years BC. He and his followers were said to have been wiped out in a plague, but the great island was known in Irish as Oileán, and this Neimhidh, something like that, because of its association with him. Later it became known as Crych Laethane. Sorry, Irish people. I apologize. Because of the powerful Ui Laethane kingdom, who ruled in the area from late antiquity into the early 13th century. The island subsequently became known as Hoileán, Moor and Barra, Great Island of Barry and Barrymore, after the Barry family, who inherited it. I bet I'm saying that wrong. And I mean, it looks clear as day, but I bet I'm saying it wrong. The village on the island was known in English as Ballyvolune, overlooking, quote, the Cobh. Now, in 1743, the British built a fort, later to become known as Cobh Fort, to the east of the village. The settlement was first referred to as Cobh Village in 1750 by Smith the historian, who said, quote, it was inhabited by seamen and revenue officials, unquote. The court directory of 1787 shows about 30 businesses in the town, including one butcher and one draper. The water club established at Hallbowline, whatever, in 1720 was the...
I'm sorry, I tried so hard to not laugh.
Look, I get it. All right, I get it. I'll just start that one over. The water club established at Hallbowline in 1720 was the progenitor of the present Royal Cork Yacht Club, or the RCYC, now based in Crosshaven, and is the oldest yacht club in the world. The RCYC was based for many years in Cobh, and the President Serious Arts Center used to be a clubhouse of the RCYC organization. In 1966, the RCYC merged with the Royal Munster Yacht Club, retaining the name of the RCYC but moving its headquarters to those of the RMYC at Crosshaven at the other side of the harbor. International upheaval led to Cobh undergoing rapid development in the early 19th century. Due to the natural protection of its harbor setting, the town became important as a tactical center for naval military base purposes, never more so than at the time of the Napoleonic Wars. Today, the Irish Naval Service headquarters is on Hallbowline Island, facing Cobh. The wars against the French led to the town, then usually known as Ballyvolune, or the Cove of Cork, being developed as a British naval port assigned an admiral. Many of the present-day buildings date from this time of buildup. George Broderick 5th Viscount Middleton engaged the English architect Decimus Burton to improve the streetscape and buildings during the 1840s. The eventual cessation of hostilities dented Cove's prosperity for a while, but it soon became known as a health resort. Many patients stayed here for their health because of the temperate climate. Apparently it's beautiful. I would imagine. I want to go so bad. Please take me. Please take me. Amongst their numbers was Charles Wolfe, who wrote, quote, "The Burial of Sir John Moore after Corunna," unquote. Wolfe's body is buried in an old church cemetery outside of town. One of the major transatlantic Irish ports, the town was a departure point for 2.5 million of the 6 million Irish people who migrated to North America between 1848 and 1950, like my great-grandparents. On April 11th, 1912, as Queenstown, it was the final port of call for the RMS Titanic before she set out across the Atlantic on the last leg of her maiden voyage. She was assisted by the PS America and the PS Ireland, 2 aging White Star Line tenders, along with several other smaller boats delivering first-class passengers' luggage. Some sources and local lore suggest that a Titanic crew member, John Coffey, a native of Queenstown, left the ship at this time, thereby saving his own life. 123 passengers boarded at Queenstown, with only 44 surviving its sinking. Originally known as the Queen's Hotel, the Commodore Hotel in Cobh opened in 1854. Now approaching its 170th year in operation, it's fair to state that the hotel stood fast during periods of intense local, national, and international conflict and has itself played a part in at least one significant historic event. The Commodore Hotel was completed in 1854 and opened as the Queen's Hotel. The name commemorated the fact that Queen Victoria, on her first ever visit to Ireland, had stepped ashore just a few yards from the site of the new hotel. The hotel consisted of 50 rooms, known as sitting and sleeping arrangements, 2 coffee rooms, a billiard room, fresh and saltwater baths, and at the time, the hotel function hall could accommodate approximately 500 people. The hotel is recorded to be one of the first purpose-built hotels in Ireland. The clientele at the time were known as the upper class. The posh of posh. The first report of an event in the Commodore Hotel was recorded in the Cork Examiner on May 25th of 1855. It was about a function held in honor of the Queen's Viceroy in Ireland, the Lord Lieutenant General, Lord Carlisle, whom Fort Carlisle is named after. The hotel ownership changed hands in 1874 and was taken over by a Mr. Raymond. The most noted proprietor of the hotel was Otto Humbert. Now, he owned the hotel during the First World War and focused on attracting the lucrative passenger line traffic that frequented Cork Harbor at the time. Under the Humbert's ownership, the hotel had electricity and telephones installed. There were also stables at the rear of the hotel for dogs and motor garage. The ground floor featured an American-style bar because we party like rock stars. Bitches. The war brought a lot of anti-German sentiment, and this reached a fever pitch with the torpedoing and sinking of the RMS Lusitania by a German U-boat on May 7th, 1915, only 26 miles from Cobh. Public reaction in the town to the event forced the Humbert family to hide out in the wine cellar as an angry crowd gathered in Westbourne Place, calling for the head to be burnt down. The hotel, not his head. That'd be weird.
That would be weird.
Yeah. When Lusitania survivors were brought ashore, ship's officers and well-to-do passengers were accommodated and treated here. Now, at this time, the hotel was converted into a hospital, having been commandeered by an English lady who was holidaying in Queenstown. Her husband was involved in the fighting in the war in India. The hotel has a copy of a letter that she wrote to her beloved husband detailing exactly what she did at the time. There is also a mention of the hotel in Lady Margaret Mackworth's, later known as the Viscountess, it's either Viscountess or Viscountess Rhonda. Her book, quote, "This was my world," unquote. She had survived the Lusitania sinking. The resting place of many of those who died as a result of the Lusitania sinking is located in the Old Church Cemetery, only 5 minutes' drive from the hotel. Burials were in 3 mass graves and a number of individual plots, all of which can still be seen today. Following Irish independence in 1921, the hotel changed its name from Queen's Hotel to the States Hotel. In 1939, it became the Commodore. The O'Shea family acquired the hotel in 1968 and conducted extensive renovations. It was even made available to the general public. Now, the hotel has now 46 en-suite bedrooms, 22 of which overlook the second largest natural harbor in the world, Cork Harbor. Cobh also overlooks an island known as Spike Island. Spike Island is an island of 103 acres in Cork Harbor Island, Ireland. Originally the site of a monastic settlement, the island is dominated by an 18th century bastion fort now named Fort Mitchell. The island's strategic location within the harbor meant that it was used at times for defense and as a prison. Since the early 21st century, the island has been developed as a heritage tourist attraction with 5.5 million, I'm assuming it was euros. I forgot to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it was euros, investment in expedition and visitor spaces and accompanying tourism marketing.
Wow, that's a lot.
There were in excess of 81,000 visitors to the island during 2019. That's a 21% increase on 2018's numbers. Spike Island was named Top European Tourist Attraction at the 2017 World Travels Awards.
Wow.
The principal evidence for a monastic foundation on Spike Island comes from Arkdale's Monisticon Hibernicum, which states that Saint Mokuwada, I don't know, founded a monastery there in the 7th century. I told you I was going to be struggling with this
I'm like
one.
hiding behind my mic because I'm laughing. I can't.
I'm trying.
I know.
They are hard.
You're doing great. Doing such a good job.
Okay. Composure. While this may be correct, another passage from the life of Saint Mokuwada, I don't know. I'm so mad that I can't say it. Implies that Mokuwada was associated with a place called Raheen rather than Spike. A grant to St. Thomas Abbey in Dublin in 1178 of the Church of the St. Rusian on Spike Island may lend credence to a monastic settlement, as the name and date both indicate a Celtic foundation. The ruins of a church are reported to exist on Spike Island in 1774. The grant to St. Thomas Abbey in 1178 coincides with the surrender of lands, including Spike Island, by Diarmid MacCarthy, King of Desmond to the Normans. In 1182, one Raymond Mangonel was granted and offered, I've never heard this word and I looked it up, I couldn't find it, Spike Island. There are no further recorded changes in ownership until 1427. In this year, records suggest that William, son of John Rate, granted John Pike, amongst other lands in premises, the land of Innispiggy, Innyspyge. If there's any Irish listeners, please let me know how to say all these words. I don't care that I'm getting them wrong, but I would like to know how to say them. In the County Cork. In 1490, Thomas Pike granted to Maurice Ronan of Kinsale his holdings in Spike Island. In the 17th century, the island was in possession of the Roche and Galway families until the rebellion of 1641, when these families forfeited possessions of the island. Although this forfeiture was reversed on the accession of King Charles II of England in 1660, they did not regain possession. Now, in 1698, the island was in the possession of Arnold Joost van Keppel, 1st Earl of Albemarle, who had accompanied William of Orange to England in 1688. And in 1698, he conveyed the island to William Smith of Ballymore on the Great Island. In the 1770s, the island was in the hands of Nicholas Fitton. It would seem that the government leased part of the island for fortifications in the 1770s, while the owner remained in residence, the house only being demolished after the construction of the present fort. Eventually, the entire island was rented. It was possibly used by smugglers for a time, and a map of circa 1600 clearly shows some form of fortified tower on the island, similar to a depiction of Belvelly Castle on the Great Island is also shown. Now, the island location at the entrance to Cork Harbor meant that the island held strategic importance, and it was significant. It was a significant site in the French intervention following the Glorious Revolution of 1689. The first artillery fortification on the island was built in 1779. Its construction was prompted by the outbreak of the American Revolution in 1775, and in particular by the entry of France and Spain into the war on the American side. Cork Harbor was used as an assembly point for convoys to the Americas, and at one point, more than 400 vessels were assembled in the harbor. Additionally, Cork was a source of supplies for the British forces operating in the West Indies and North America. There was, therefore, a need to protect the harbor from potential attackers. Now, the Spike Island Battery was a temporary work and armed with 18 24-pounder cannons, moved from Cobh Fort. After the Treaty of Paris ended the war in 1783, this temporary work was demolished. And things like this went on for many years. Okay, new forts were added, but the area was generally used as protection, as it would be an entry point into the mainland. Now, later the site would be used as a prison and convict depot. The island was used to house convicts prior to the penal transportation. Opened in 1847 to deal with growing numbers of convictions for theft during the Great Famine, the prison grew into what, quote, for a few years in the mid-19th century was probably the biggest prison in British Empire, unquote. Wow. It later gained a reputation as Ireland Alcatraz.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Spike Island was home to Ellen Nellie Orgon, who gained special permission to take First Communion shortly after her death at the age of 4. On hearing her story, the Pope lowered the age at which communion could be taken from 12 to 7. This was a big story I found. I have no idea why it plays such a significant part other than that they are very Catholic over there. But this was a big deal. It literally changed their religion.
That's crazy.
But she was said to have been like this godly spiritual child. Mm-hmm. It was a very sad story, actually. I did read the story. I didn't add it in here because it didn't have any relevance to what we were talking to. Right. But it's a very sad story, like her family.
Wow.
Just a quick note as to who Ellen was, because I didn't know. She was born August 24th, 1903, and lived until February 2nd of 1908, known as Little Nellie of God. She was an Irish child, venerated by some in the Roman Catholic Church for her precious spiritual awareness and alleged mystical life, particularly dedicated to the Eucharist. The story of her life inspired Pope Pius X to admit young children to Holy Communion. In 1910, Pope Pius X issued the decree Quam Singulari, which lowered the age of Holy Communion for children from 12 years of age to 7.
That's a big gap, too.
Yeah, but again, it's actually a very sad story. She did not live a good life for such a young person. She had it rough. The island remained in use as a garrison and prison through the Irish War of Independence when IRA prisoners were held there. Richard Barrett was among those detained there, but escaped during the truce of 1921. Over 1,400 men were held on the island at its peak until the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty. On December 6, 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was concluded. It provided for the establishment of the Irish Free State, which happened on December 6, 1922. The treaty included provisions by which the British would retain sovereignty over 3 strategically important ports known as the treaty ports. Accordingly, even after the establishment of the Irish Free State, the Royal Navy continued to maintain its presence on Spike Island. Spike Island remained under British sovereignty until July 11, 1938, when, pursuant to the Anglo-Irish Trade Agreement of April 25, 1938, the territory was ceded to Ireland. The handover ceremonies were attended by senior military and political figures, including Eamon de Valera and Frank Aiken, following its handover to Ireland. The island's installations were renamed Fort Mitchell, and after John Mitchell, national activist and political journalist who was held on the island for a time. The island remained the site of a prison and military base for the regular Irish Army, the FCA, and later the Navy. It was held there for some time. Mm-hmm. Late into the 20th century, it was used as a youth correctional facility. On September 1st, 1985, inmates rioted, and as a subsequent Dale committee reported, quote, civilians, prison officers, and the gardae, just means guards. I don't know why they always spell everything weird, on the island were virtual prisoners of the criminals, unquote. During the riot, one of the accommodation blocks, Block A, actually caught fire and is known as the Burnt Block. This prison facility is closed since 2004. The island had a small civilian population. A small school, church, and ferry service to Cobh served the population. The civilian population has since left the island. Some things to keep in mind. Spike Island's harsh conditions, poor medical care, and overcrowding led to an almost astronomical death rate, especially in the years during the famine when the prison first opened. Early on, it was a place synonymous with death. More than 1,000 prisoners perished in its first 7 years of operation.
Wow.
It's said that as the years wore on, some inmates were sent to Australia, some returned to their homes in Ireland, but many never left the island. So between Spike Island and its thousands of deaths, and the Commodore Hotel, which housed the injured from the attack on the RMS Lusitania, it seems that Cobh was littered with the dead. It saw times of war, famine, and despair that parts of the world would never understand. It's no doubt that there are bloodstains everywhere. While Ireland is a beautiful country, its beauty was paid for in blood. And while its people have called it home for hundreds of years, it would seem that some of its residents will call it home for an eternity.
Wow. That is a pretty gross history.
Yeah, I went off on the history on that one. I'm sorry. I could have went farther, but I was like, oh, I'm getting out of hand here.
You love all that stuff, though. So I don't know. I found that very interesting. It's so different from the stuff, I guess, that us Americans are used to hearing, and it's like, it reminds you that that stuff, war and all, and famine and all that, it happened everywhere.
Well, you got to think, in certain periods of time, what we consider the slums here in America would have been other countries' upper class.
Right.
Because they knew famines and they knew poor at a level we didn't.
Right.
So they really went through it, and a lot of people died. I mean, a lot of people died here early on, but it's America, and we're lucky enough, I guess, to be here in a place that doesn't have that kind of stuff.
Right.
The history for us was pretty short when it came to that, but the rest of the world, it was a long time. And they said the first 7 years of that place, it went on for a lot more years. Thousands of people died in that prison.
Such a long
time. Thousands.
It's such a long time.
Not to mention the people who lived out there, worked there, went to school there. Everybody. I mean, a lot of people died there. I
found it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I looked for actual numbers, but because it's been open, this land has been around essentially forever. It's hard to find exact numbers.
Yeah. I found it very interesting that, like, the Titanic, before it sank, left this harbor that we're talking about. I found that super interesting. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
That's
Well, in the
so
RMS
crazy.
Lusitania, well, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but that's a big part of history. That was huge. It was huge in World War II or
Yeah.
whichever one it was. But that was a big thing. Like that's something I remember from school.
Right.
And then to say that all the survivors were housed in the Commodore, well, it's no wonder the Commodore's got stuff happening.
Got problems and
come on.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, so this land has a lot of stuff. And like I said, after looking, there are more places. One of which I'll mention super briefly at the end of this.
Okay.
Very briefly. I'm not even going to you'll see what I mean. It'll be very brief. But I think this is an area that we will come back to.
Okay.
Because there are more places that I wasn't aware of. And the place that I want to do for our special Halloween episode is in this area.
Oh.
But we're not going to say what that is until we get closer to Halloween. But that wraps up the extreme amount of history I did. And I am sure you have some stuff as well.
I absolutely do. So a shout out for me for where I found a lot of my stuff is going to be spiritedisle.ie.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And irishexaminer.com and also Wikipedia. I found something on Wikipedia.
The almighty powerful Wikipedia.com. Wikipedia.com.
And so this town and the land surrounding Cobh has been around and has seen a lot of things, both good and bad. There are many stories and legends and deep history that attribute to the things that have happened around this beautiful place. Stories come from all over, different buildings, different spots on the land, different businesses, and even homes. There is no shortage of haunted tales from the Isle of Cork. I wanted to take you through a few of these places and give you an idea of the ghostly happenings that occur in so many of these different places. Number 1, the Commodore Hotel. With some people over the years believing that the trauma surrounding the sinking Lusitania just off the coast has trapped the souls of passengers within the walls of the hotel. Some guests have reported unexplained noises, a strange chill in a part of the building, and that is said to be attributed to the spirit of a British soldier who took his own life there in the building. But the most common tale reported is the sound of a wailing infant echoing through the upper floors. Some stories suggest that a deceased baby was found in a suitcase, or possibly a cupboard, many years ago, but this has never been found in any reports. While the 3-star rated Commodore Hotel is well respected and has generally favorable reviews, several comments posted on TripAdvisor allude to otherworldly encounters. Quote, "The day we checked out, my friend said she woke up several times with somebody walking in the room above with loud, heavy shoes. It turned out that there was no room above us, and we learned that a soldier had killed himself in the hotel. My husband and I were in different rooms, and we both heard heavy things being moved around during the night. After talking to Pat, a tour guide, it turns out that after the sinking of the Lusitania, the hotel was turned into a hospital and morgue for the wounded and dead. So it could have been the spirits moving the beds around. I would definitely stay here again, just for the ghostly experience." End quote. Another review stated, quote, "During the night, I began to hear the sound of a child or toddler crying in the room next to us. And the more I focused on the crying, the louder it got, until it reached a point where my ears began to ring violently, and I started to feel dizzy. The crying was extremely loud and sounded like it was coming from all angles. After being in touch with the paranormal investigators, I have now discovered that I am not the only one to have this experience. If you like a good night's sleep, avoid the top floor. Booking room tip: don't go for the top floor. It is most certainly haunted." End quote. Number 2, Our Lady's Lee Road. Arguably the best known haunted spot in the city, Our Lady's and St. Kevin's occupy an imposing site on Lee Road, overlooking the Lee Fields. The site has become home to two psychiatric facilities since the 1800s, when the Ellington Lunatic Asylum opened. It later became known as Our Lady Psychiatric Hospital in the 1950s, and the red-bricked St. Kevin's Hospital was built in the late 1890s. Our Lady's closed in 1992. St. Kevin's Hospital closed in 2002 and was damaged by a major fire. Many people with an interest in paranormal activity have monitored the area over the years, and some have witnessed apparitions and have captured EVP recorded voices. It is still believed many of the asylum's patients still walk the corridors and can be heard in the hospital's empty wards and wander down the streets that was once their home. Number 3, North Infirmary Hospital. The former North Infirmary Hospital was built in 1720 and was the first general hospital to be opened in Cork. Originally holding only 24 beds, it eventually expanded to 115 beds. Over the years, it went through many changes and treated military authorities, wounded soldiers, and many more. After closing in 1987, the building remained empty and was vandalized and partially burned. It was purchased in 1996 and developed into the Shandon Court Hotel. It then exchanged hands and by 2008 became the Meridon Hotel, I believe, I don't know, and remains in operation today. It is believed to be haunted by many spirits. With all the death that it has seen in the hundreds of years it was in operation as a hospital, is there any wonder that it would have some souls that have stuck around? Staff at the hotel report strange happenings and uneasy feelings throughout the building, and guests have also reported the same, with some guests, once again on TripAdvisor, recording their experience. One guest said, quote, "I had a ghost cat in my room. 2 or 3 other rooms had independent paranormal experiences. I am an engineer and do not believe in paranormal stuff, but this makes me question my belief for the first time. We all had our windows looking out towards the cemetery. We saw a ghost at the wardrobe, a lady the height of the wardrobe, wearing a beige dress with flowers, and felt as if we were being watched all night, as well as our door not opening, as if it was locked from the inside." End quote. Number 4, the White Lady of Charles Fort. Charles Fort was built on the east coast of County Cork in 1682, on the site of an earlier stronghold that was Ringcurran Castle. Every aspect of the fort was made to repel attacks from the harbor and was an important strategic location during the siege of Kinsale between England and Ireland. Today, Charles Fort is one of the best remaining examples of a star-shaped fort in Europe. It was declared an Irish national monument in 1973 due to its part in Irish history. Even more than its military history, Charles Fort is known for its resident ghost, the White Lady. The legend of the White Lady is the tale of willful Warrender, daughter of the commander of Charles Fort, Governor Warrender. She fell in love with an officer named Sir Trevor Ashurst, and soon they married. After their wedding, Wilful and Sir Trevor were walking around the grounds of the fort. Wilful saw a beautiful flower at the base of a battlement, and so Trevor decided to climb down to get it for her. Then, an on-duty sentry volunteered for the job. Sir Trevor took the man's place as guard, and he waited. Sir Trevor fell asleep, and when the sentry didn't return, Wilful's father was on his nightly inspection and saw a sentry leaning against the wall. Governor Warrender had a reputation for enforcing a severe military code. When he saw the slumped sentry, he called out a challenge. It went unanswered. Determining that the sentry was asleep on duty, Warrender shot him through the heart. He only realized afterwards that he had shot his own son-in-law. Grief-stricken Wilful jumped from one of the ramparts, throwing herself into the icy waters below. Her ghost is called the White Lady because she wanders the fort in her wedding dress. It is said she wanders looking for any sleeping sentries, waiting to wake them. Wilful's ghost is usually described as a beautiful soul, sad but kind. A local man claims he went for a run near Charles Fort one night. At one point, he stopped to retie his shoe. He put his hand on the fort wall for balance and felt another, unseen hand reach out from the wall to help him. In another instance, a nursemaid saw the White Lady standing over the bed of a sleeping child. And a surgeon's child asked her father who the White Lady smiling down at them was. The White Lady is not always a gentle spirit. Many soldiers who served at the fort, mainly captains, report being pushed down the stairs by an unseen force. They also saw a ghostly woman walking through the locked and closed doors. Some locals believe they've seen the ghost of Wilful's father as well. After killing his son-in-law and losing his daughter, Governor Warrender, in despair, shot himself that very same night. His ghost appears as a grief-stricken man, sobbing uncontrollably. Number 5. Cork City Jail. This place is a former prison, now turned museum, and yet another well-known haunted site. This place, now referred to as Cobb's most captivating experience, a step back in time to see what 19th and early 20th century life was like, inside and outside the prison walls. History brought to life with amazingly lifelike features, furnished cells, sound effects, and fascinating exhibitions. The exhibition fascinates visitors of all ages and nationalities, and the tour is available in up to 13 languages. The 19th century Cobh City Jail has most recently been the setting for the World's Ghost Convention, which was drawn to the prison and its resident ghosts. Ghost sightings were reported by members of the audience and speakers since the first ghost convention was established in 2001. During the restoration of the prison, men's voices could be heard by workers. Apparitions of women in long dresses have been seen around the jail by visitors and staff, including the guests and staff. One guest experience shared on TripAdvisor. Quote, "I loved my visit here. Very knowledgeable staff, and gives you the feel of how it was for the inmates of the past. I even had a ghost encounter in one of the cells. And when I went back and told the man running the tour, he informed me that yes, a lot of people encountered the same thing in that particular cell." End quote. Number 6. Spike Island. Spike Island is the name that instantly draws images of intrigue and darkness. Named after a natural phenomenon, this landmark location has 4 witnesses in despair over centuries and is known for its historical fascination and paranormal intrigue. It is an award-winning 103-acre tourist attraction based off the coast of Cork and accessible by boat from Cobh. The island has seen violence, murder, despair, and isolation, and is also the site of a mass grave where over 1,000 inmates were buried in unmarked graves. Little wonder that many try to escape the island, referred to as, quote, hell, either by attempting to get out or by taking their own life. But one wonders whether their souls have been allowed to leave. Multiple hauntings are said to afflict Spike Island, including the gruesome specter of a man with black holes for eyes, who has terrified many people over the years. Soldiers have even fired their weapons at the ominous figure, obviously to no avail. Other visitors have encountered a white mist, which is attributed to the former prisoner, John Mitchell, while a man dressed in an old-fashioned uniform has been spotted near a fireplace. A lady in white seen roaming the grounds in many different spots. In the 1980s, naval cadets stationed here have reported many kinds of disturbances. The naval officers also reported seeing dark figures standing over their bunks. While running as a prison, the prisoners in the jail complained and voiced their uneasiness to the guards about the black entity that visited many of them in their cells during the night. Many paranormal groups have visited the island, with Ghost Hunter International doing an investigation in 2010, and subsequent visits from local investigators, Ghost Erie, and Cork Paranormal Investigators, as well as an investigation from one of our favorites, Destination Fear. All of these places span across an entire town. It is said that the locals tend to be a cynical bunch, and when it comes to ghosts, they are likely more non-believers out there than believers. But the area of Rebel County in Ireland holds so much history and death, it's hard to think that the spirits wouldn't live among them, plagued by the gruesome and sad history that came before them.
Wow. That was awesome.
Thank you.
It's a lot of good stuff.
I found a bunch of different places, and I couldn't pick one to do.
Yeah, I knew there was going to be a lot of places. Once I started looking into it more, I found a lot more places than what we talked about. So that was great.
Thank you.
I feel like it's time to go to Ireland and go to the top floor.
Oh, yes, please.
Look for the white lady.
Let's go to Ireland and visit all the places.
All of them. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good history. Some really good stories. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it might be time to ask the question.
The question.
That question.
Is it real?
Well, me. What do you think, Megan?
There's so many different places and so many different things that have happened over the years. And like we've said before, here in America, walking anywhere in the United States and in Ireland, you walk over so many bodies and so many things that have happened in the times before. I would love to know more. I would love to hear more. I would love to see more. But I'm going to say, I don't know, probably a 50-50 just for lack of evidence.
It's fair.
Yeah. I think there definitely could be things going on.
Can never go wrong with a 50-50.
What about you?
I'm going to say yes.
Oh, wow.
I mean, if we think anything in the U.S. is haunted, I don't know why you would, not you, but anybody could think that something, a piece of land as old as time, that's probably goes back as far as like original recorded history goes with death and just the amount of deaths from the wars, the famines, the attacks, the prisons, everything. Mm-hmm. There's no way. I just don't think it couldn't not have something going on there.
Yeah.
None. Not at all.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm definitely saying yes.
All in.
Yeah, all in.
I'd love to see more from this place investigations from more than just the Spike Island part of things, you know? I think that would be absolutely amazing. And maybe one day it can be us.
Hey, maybe. I'm down.
Absolutely.
I did I did search around the internet because I really liked when we played the EVPs before, and I was able to find one.
Okay.
And I want to play it. It's only about 12 seconds long. Let me pull this up so I can actually read what it is before we play it. But
okay. Do you know where it's from?
I do.
Okay.
It's when I said at the beginning that I would talk very momentarily about another spot, this is what I was talking about.
Awesome.
This was April 17th of 2017. And this is actually from Facebook. It's from the Cork Supernatural Society. It says, last Monday, the team made their way to Cobh for a Titanic anniversary investigation. We investigated Kelly's Bar in the heart of Cobh. Many of the 123 passengers who departed from Cobh, Queenstown back then, spent their last night on Irish soil in what is now known as Kelly's Bar. We have picked up this EVP of a male saying what we are all hear is the name Thomas 5 seconds into the audio. The recorder was left in an empty room on the first floor, which is now a storeroom. Now, this was recorded minutes before we left and headed back to the city. At the time of this recording, only 4 of us and 1 staff member were in the building. The motion camera, which was placed in the room, only went off on 3 occasions during the night, and that was only us entering or leaving the room. This piece of audio is truly stunning, and to know for 100% that the room was empty is very impressive for us as a paranormal group. And a bar, a fully bodied apparition, it doesn't get much better than this. The current owner of the bar is called Tom, and we wonder if this EVP is some sort of message to him. I have listened to this already, I'm not going to lie, and it is pretty impressive.
Wow.
It's probably one of the best EVPs I've ever heard. So I'm going to crank this thing up kind of loud.
Okay.
Because I want to be able to make sure you hear it. But
yeah.
I might play it a couple times.
Oh my God, let's do it.
Okay,
I'm so excited.
Here we go. Let me turn it up a little louder. It's in a replay. I know you can hear it.
I just have my mouth hanging open. I know no one can see me, but
That's pretty.
Wow.
It's pretty good. I listened to it earlier, and I would have heard Thomas before they even said that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very slow and drawn out, but it is definitely Thomas.
It's very cool. So,
wow, that is amazing.
I mean, it's just another testament of the area. And I wanted to give a shout out to somebody we didn't even mention in this, but they are called I want to say they were like the Cobh Paranormal Investigation or something. They're on YouTube. These people do investigations all through the area, all over this area. So there is so much more than I anticipated when we first started doing this, because there's most of these places I've never even heard of. So shout out to the original person who gave us this idea. I think he just kind of started us off on an adventure, because we will be coming back to this area and checking out more stuff. But for now,
exciting.
We had, I guess what some consider maybe the 2 main places, but I feel like there's a lot more.
Absolutely. I think there's so many more places to go, and now Kelly's Bar.
Yeah,
we add another one to the list.
But I think this is kind of bringing us down to the end. And where can they reach you?
You can find me us on Instagram at forthebooze_podcast, on Facebook at forthebooze.
Yep, they could find us on Twitter at forthebooze, and YouTube for some reason at forthebooze. If you want to watch us in, 10 to 15 minute increments of each show, knock yourself out.
Super weird.
Don't forget, if you're part of an investigation team, if you have a suggestion, if you want to send in a story, email us at forthebooze12@gmail.com. And for the love of God, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Tell your homies. Bring it to the hood. Whatever. You can write something or not write something. The 5 stars does help. we're just trying to get the show ahead a little bit. So it's always appreciated. It only takes about 2 minutes.
Rate and review, and we always love hearing from you guys and hearing what you think of the
Yes.
show. So
Also, every Wednesday, most Wednesdays at 5:30 on Twitter. If you follow us, you can come in with us and our friend Rick at Maximum Oddities. We do a space called Paranormal Oddities at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's most of the time me. If Megan's home, she'll be there. But there's a lot of us in there. Rick, there's Jonah from Blue Collar Enlightenment Show, Ashley from Fear the Lullaby. But there's just tons of people that come in, RKB, East Coast Paranormal. All these people show up, and it's usually a good time. So come in there Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard.
and it definitely is a good time. A lot of laughs, a lot of cool stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We always like to do it. It's a lot of fun to meet people and talk to people. But I guess this is going to be it for now, and we'll talk to all you guys later. Bye.